TJ Rives joining us on the program. What's going on, buddy? How are you?
I got in on the very tail end. I had no idea what you were saying. Who's going to have to live with what for the rest of their lives?
I was just talking about Jon Gruden and the decision to put him back in the Ring of Honor.
Right.
And TJ, to be completely transparent, I'm a little, I don't want to say miffed in this situation, but I just look at this thing where I just hope that I'm all for forgiveness. I'm all for giving people second chances. But when you send out an email with a racist trope like that, with towards DeMaurice Smith, I just think it's something that we just need to be cognizant of, and we need to continue to spread positivity and optimism and inclusivity when we're talking about sports and in life. And I think that in a situation like this, that we need to make sure we keep this at the forefront of the if we want to sit there and be forgiving, and I'm all for that, we also have to remember, we have to make sure that this is not allowed and it's not okay, because I don't think it's the right thing if people make comments like this and then a couple months later all is forgotten. Forgiven's one thing, but forgotten, I think it's just, you have to be smart.
Well, and keep in mind, this is not, I know you don't mean this. It's not a couple months later. I mean, this is basically, 4 years ago. And it is interesting because I've talked to a couple of Buccaneer fans that said, why are they doing this now? Why not wait a few more years? But they were very moved, apparently, at Monty Kiffin's service, where Lane Kiffin was talking about second chances and what his dad believed in. And Monty even expressed, apparently, to the Glazers that Jon deserved a second chance and a benefit of the doubt. And as I posted yesterday, I obviously have insight here because I worked his radio shows, his Monday radio show, the pregame, the postgame. I often would joke with Jon that we're talking to each other more than our wives at times here during the football season on this. I understand they had to do what they did with the firestorm of controversy that was around those emails. And I understand now why a few years later they want to have forgiveness and put his name back up in the Ring of Honor for the Super Bowl that he won. So I get all of that, and I get your point. I welcome all points of view. I get your point that this should still be at the forefront. One other thing that I would say on this is there were over 600,000 emails in that Daniel Snyder investigation, and there were only 17 of them that were leaked, all related to Jon Gruden. And so this is what he's been suing about, and he has been progressively still winning on. He wants his day in a deposition and in a civil matter, not NFL quiet arbitration, to have all of those emails released. And let's see what everybody was saying about everybody besides just him. So I understand that point of view. Again, I welcome all points of view on this. So there you go. There's my takes.
And I appreciate that. And, the only thing that I would say in response is that, you can, if iHeart came back and said, we want 600, taking all these emails and 17 of them are mine, I can guarantee you right now, out of all 17 emails, TJ, none of them would say anything quite like that. So, it's not my fault. It's what about him? Well, you got to take ownership for what you did. Hopefully we can be better.
Again, as we play tennis and hit it back and forth, if there's 25 other people that are in those emails saying racist, sexist, demeaning things, and none of them are accountable, that's kind of Jon Gruden's point with the lawsuit.
That's true, but it doesn't absolve him.
Doesn't absolve him.
From blame.
I'm just saying, in the bigger picture, you might be taking some other people out of some Rings of Honor and some Team Hall of Fames and some other things off of that. Just big picture.
No,
I welcome all points of view.
Love the conversation, man, and of course, talking all Bucs and college basketball, and I definitely want to bend your ear on some boxing as well. Tank Davis, man. I wonder if the O is going to stay. But let's start with the Bucs. I mean, what do you think now as we get closer and closer? Godwin, Lavonte David, those are the two big names. What does your gut tell you about them and their status with the Bucs for the 2025 season? You think they're coming back?
My friend, if there's one thing that we have learned from the pattern of Jason Light and the Buccaneer organization, with the Glazers as the ones writing the checks, they want to reward their own and take care of their own. And they learned, actually, the hard way, go back to the Jon Gruden era, where Jon Gruden said at the top, we don't need Warren Sapp anymore. We don't need John Lynch anymore. There were two or three of them around that time. And the Lynch one obviously blew up in their face. He played at a Pro Bowl level. Sapp sort of had one decent year, I think, in Oakland. If Sapp was on here, he would try to dispute that. But
Sure.
they learned from, if Mike Allstott wants to finish his career as a Buccaneer, let him do it. And the Derek Brooks one was interesting because he was basically at the end, and Derek still wanted to try to play, but physically he could not anymore. And he actually shopped around and found out from other NFL teams that you're basically going to be a reserve or a special teams player, which he had never been a special teams player. But Rondé Barber finished as a Buck is my point. So bring it back now to the present day. These guys, if Godwin still wants to play, I cannot believe they're going to let him walk out the door. They'll work something out. Lavonte David, the same thing. My God, that's one of my guys. That's one of my guys going back the last 13 years. He does not need to be in any other jersey if he still wants to play one more year on a one-year deal. Come on back, 54. So I'm spewing a little optimism on a Friday with the Jay Recher show and podcast here. I think if both of those guys are playing next year, they're going to be playing for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'll put that out there on February the 28th.
I love it. I love it. We're coming closer to the NFL draft. What position would you look at, TJ, as, hey, this is the position that the Buccaneers need to focus on to try to shore things up for 2025?
In the present day NFL, you cannot have enough edge rushers. You cannot have enough cover corners. They need both of those things. Mm-hmm. Nobody's asking me, as I often like to say on these things, the Glazers and Jason Light do not consult with me over coffee and donuts or anything else over what exactly they're thinking and his scouting staff is thinking. But you have to believe in free agency first, and then with the draft, edge rusher, cover corner, maybe a couple of cover corners, depending on what they decide to do with Jamel Dean at that price tag or not. Does he renegotiate? Do they say goodbye? I remember a year ago at this time, they traded away Carlton Davis at a large price tag, which was a savvy move to save some cap space. What do you think? I'm going there. I'm going edge rusher. I'm going cover corner, free agency, and at the top of the draft.
Yeah, I think there's three positions that you look at that you always want to throw numbers at, and that's wide receiver, that's corner, and that's defensive line, right? Because those are rotational. You're not worried about rotational for your offensive line. And the running backs, it's a small stable anyway. So, I mean, it's not like you're going to bring in six different running backs, right? But for me, when you're the Bucs and you saw when they had those injuries to the cornerback position, I mean, you had guys that were really giving it everything they had, but there was just a precipitous talent drop off. The one thing that I look at with the Bucs, and it's the difference between them being a division winner and a Super Bowl contender, is the pass rush. I think that is the most important thing. I think your corners inherently get better when they have less time to cover. So if I had to prioritize one, I would say the pass rush. I would say a free agent and 2 draft picks, early, late. Like I'm all for making a splash. I'm all for throwing as many numbers as humanly possible. And then whether he returns or not, you need help with the interior linebacker position. I mean, that's another spot with whether Lavonte's there or not. Devin White, I mean, you talk about a guy that, and just think about it. If in 2021 we were having the conversation about Buccaneers needing an interior linebacker, we would be talking about replacing Lavonte David and not Devin White and KJ Britt, right? It's just wild how that's how it's worked itself out. But I think those are the 3 big positions that they need to focus on.
And they were counting on Servassier Dennis, and he was good in the first couple of games, and he got a serious shoulder injury, and they put him on IR, and he never came back. And that's a guy you've drafted. But you're right. I mean, that's another position. I would consider the inside linebacker to be a little more of a luxury. Fill that in with a serviceable veteran in free agency. Listen to me playing amateur GM on a Friday with Jay Recher. Serviceable veteran at a cheaper price, maybe a middle round draft pick for the inside, but you got to rush the quarterback. You have got to rush the quarterback better than what this team has obviously done. And you invested a first round pick in JTS and Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. You invested a second round pick last year in Chris Braswell. But I'm not so sure you don't go right back in the first or second round and find the best edge rusher you can find to come in and be a monster to help off of the edge for this team. Yaya Diaby has blossomed as a middle round pick. Love that guy, but he needs help. He needs help on the outside.
And whether it's help or just the next level, the next step in his maturation, right? Because I know he wants to be considered an elite pass rusher. The pressure numbers are there. but it's a zero-sum business when you get to the outside. Sacks are there's no
Oh, yeah.
there's no black and white.
There are
There's
not a
no
lot of
gray area.
incentives
Black and
for
white.
pressures. Yeah,
Exactly.
they don't come up with pressures or quarterback hits or
That's
one
right.
of those. I will say one thing in his defense. He got held an awful lot.
Right.
I'm right down there at field level, and I don't know how many times, my radio boss, Jeff Ryan, I'm in constant communication with him during the broadcasts on the games off the air. I'm like, held Diaby again, holding Diaby again, watch the replay on Diaby again, over and over. I'm not saying it's everything, but my God, if the guy had gotten like a third of the holding calls that he should have gotten, he would have probably gotten about 10 of them last season. Because over and over again, I think a lot of teams realized if we can neutralize him, the Bucs don't have a whole lot else off the end coming at the quarterback. And a lot of times he's up against a left tackle that's outstanding. But I love that guy. I love his motor. I love his attitude. And I think if there's some help, especially on the other end, moving him around, I think Diaby can be even better.
TJ, what do you make of the whole Todd Bowles, Liam Cohen thing? It's been a while since we spoke, but obviously Liam probably didn't go about it in the best way where fans are really too thrilled with.
That's okay. Wait a minute.
Putting
That's
it mildly.
that's the diplomatic way to say it.
But I think it's a blessing in disguise because I was one of those people that looked at it and said, you can be a great play caller, but you want to be a good leader of men, and you want to be a guy that knows what it takes to to lead a team. And for all the things that people don't like Todd for, they think he's too calm on the sideline, which I think is probably the most useless argument of all time. But I just think the Bucs are in a good spot with Todd Bowles, the head coach. What do you make about how that whole thing went down and where they're at when it comes to Grizzard and everybody else going forward to next season?
I was watching your takes. I was right on board with you should really question now that you've seen this. Will he be any good as a head coach if this is the integrity part of it? And I know now in the modern day professional sports, it's all I, me, grab as much money as you can, grab the next gig, go somewhere else in free agency, transfer portal, my lord, in college sports. I'm not going to stick around here. Somebody else give me some more money and I'll go somewhere else. It's crazy. But in terms of Todd Bowles, I love dealing with him. He's had success. He knows and realizes and understands right now there is an expectation that this team not only win the division, which we know has been a weaker division, but you got to do some damage in January and February in the playoffs here for this team. And you have another offensive coordinator now. That's nothing new. How about 8 consecutive years that Baker Mayfield's got a different offensive coordinator? You're trying on him yet again. You're definitely giving him a challenge, but I think he's ready to accept it. There are a lot of pieces here for this Buccaneer team, and I am excited to see how it gets augmented, how it gets supplemented here. And the one thing is they respond to Todd Bowles. Say whatever you want about demeanor on the sideline or whatever, but I can tell you player after player after player will say to you privately that they love this guy. They play hard for this guy. And look at each of the last 2 years when they came off of the bye week, just to eliminate this point. They had lost to San Francisco in heartbreaking fashion, had 2 weeks to stew, had lost repeated last-minute games, Thursday night to Atlanta, had lost to the Chiefs in overtime. That team could have gone, woo, right off the cliff out of the bye week. How did they look off the bye week? Question the competition all you want, but they flattened the New York Giants in that game in New York. And there were a lot of people in New York, and you're from New York, that thought the Giants were going to roll that day. And I was talking to Tiki Barber off the air, who was doing the game on TV on CBS. And the CBS people were all ready for the Tommy DeVito stuff. They were all ready for the Giants getting their season back on track. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did this for about 3 hours in East Rutherford, New Jersey. That didn't say everything, but it said a lot to anybody paying attention. They're still playing hard for Todd Bowles. And down the stretch of the season, when they were winning the games they had to win, they go all the way out to Los Angeles to play the Chargers, who are good at their place. And again, in the second half, they're doing this to Justin Herbert and to that offense, and Baker and Mike Evans and Rashad White and Bucky Irving are destroying them on offense, and it's a blowout for the Bucs in L.A. late in the year. again, they play hard for that guy. They did play hard for him at the end of the year, and there's something to be said for that.
You got that right. I remember that second half of that Chargers game. They took Justin Herbert out of the game. I mean, they just took him out because they were just like, we can't keep doing this right now. We're just banging our head against the wall, which I think is
And who had that, by the way? Buccaneer blowout in the second half in L.A., but again, we only need to I love the fans, and I did sports radio. You did sports radio for long. I did sports radio with the calls forever. And fans think they know, oh, the locker room is terrible. They've lost the locker room. Who wants to play for that guy? Well, I'm here to tell you they play hard for Todd Bowles. They did play hard, and the evidence is look at the games at the end of 2023 and at the end of 2024 when they were still battling, playing hard, and winning games. When so many times we've seen previous Buccaneer situations where it did go off the cliff and it's over, and you're talking about the draft in December, and you're talking about a 13-14 loss season.
Looking ahead, yeah, you're not worried about that season anymore. Let's switch seasons. Let's talk some college hoops.
Yes.
What about my guy, Rick Pitino here? I grew up as a kid loving St. John's, number 7 right now. They're clinched share of the Big East. They do that TV show on Vice. Like, there's certain coaches, right? I mean, he's the first coach to win 5 different championships, conference titles
in a regular season.
Season conference title. Like, it's amazing because he's not getting any younger. And for all the, we need young coaches, here comes Coach Rick Pitino, and now St. John's is a top 10 team and sharing a share of the Big East. Like, it's pretty wild.
What a story. They have been dormant for 25 years in that program, and he revitalized them in just 2 seasons. They are a tough defensive team. They're not a great shooting team, but how fun is this to have them involved, have New York City care? Because this just into the newsroom, New York doesn't really care about college sports. You know this, but they care about St. John's.
That's the
right
only
now,
thing. That's the
what they're
only
doing.
thing that they did it, and it went back to the 80s with Luke Harnaseka and Chris Mullen and guys like that.
Walter the Truth Berry, Mark Jackson,
Mark
that Final Four team. It was 40 years ago. It's been a while.
Yeah, I mean, 3 Big East teams that were in the Final Four that year. And then there was a little bit of a run in the 90s there with TJ Lavin. They had Felipe Lopez and Ron Artest and Bootsy Thornton and those guys. New York City loves you're right, the only college sport that New York really loves is St. John's basketball when they're good, right? You'll have New York City kids go play for Georgetown and Villanova and UConn and things like that. But when St. John's is good, it's like, okay, we're all in. But you're right, it's been a long time. And I think this is such a unique year in college basketball because there are so many blue bloods and so many kind of like old names. Like when you look at it, you see there's Duke up there, right? You're like, wow, that's good. But you also see other teams and you go, oh man, now Florida is all right. Are they a football team? No, they're number 3. I mean, look, Auburn, Duke, and Florida, right?
Correct.
Houston, Tennessee, Alabama, St. John's, Michigan State, Iowa State, and Texas Tech. The top 10 is very rarely the same in the AP and in the coaches poll. But as good as the SEC has been, like you have these other teams. You have Iowa State in there. You have Michigan State. You've got Duke. I mean, I think this is one of the more entertaining years that we've seen in the last decade for college hoops.
And if you have not watched Cooper Flagg at Duke, I'm saying to the audience, not just you, Jay.
You know I have.
Phenomenal. All right, so they were at the Garden last Saturday night, just annihilating Illinois. Cooper Flagg's first game at Madison Square Garden. And stay tuned, brother. You know what's coming. They are going to pair Duke and St. John's in the East Regional.
Oof.
And the second weekend is in Newark. And that ticket, I looked yesterday, that ticket is already like a $700 ticket now. $700 get-in price for the Prudential Center in Newark for the potential Duke St. John's Sweet 16 game on the Thursday night. For the second round of the tournament. Now, they obviously both have to win both games to make it happen, but watch out for that. If that is the case, St. John's, a great story. You mentioned Florida. I did not go to the University of Florida. I went to the University of Memphis, by the way. That 85 Final Four, while you're talking about it, is Georgetown, Villanova, St. John's, and my then Memphis State Tigers, by the way, before I went there. But I didn't go to Florida. I went to Memphis. Mrs. Reeves is a Bull. A USF Bull. She didn't go to Florida. She didn't go to Gainesville. I'm just saying to you, they've got guards, the Gators, Todd Golden's team with Walter Clayton, Elijah Martin, the transfer from Florida Atlantic, Recher, the other shooter. They've got bigs, the bigs that can score. Florida will be a dangerous team in the SEC tournament and in the NCAA tournament. I believe they are Elite Eight worthy. I think Florida can make a run into the second weekend and maybe even into the Elite Eight or beyond. Of course, I say this and watch them get dropped in like the first weekend in the 7-10 matchup that they got to play in the second round or something like that. But from what I've seen in the rugged SEC, Florida's the team that went into Auburn, by the way, and put 90 points on them. That's Auburn's only loss right now in the conference. So I'm just saying watch out for the Florida Gators. There's not much else in the state of Florida. Coaching changes. There's not much else for the NCAA tournament, but the Gators look like the real deal to me. What do you think?
One of the most impressive games of the year. Florida going there into Auburn, and they had their foot on the gas pedal from the beginning of the game. It wasn't like, oh, they clipped them at the end. They dominated. They were out in front. Every time Auburn would close it to 7 and 8, Florida would go out and push it back out to 12. Like, it was just constantly. It was like running a race, and you just could never catch up to them. And it was like the tortoise and the hare, but the hare never slept. The hare just stayed ahead the entire time. I like Alabama too. I think you look at Sears in the backcourt. They got Chris Youngblood, who came across from USF.
Yes,
finding his role, because we know it's about veteran guards usually when you get to the end of the year, when you get to March Madness. So I'm keeping an eye on Alabama. I mean, Alabama Auburn in the national championship game would kind of be pretty bad.
Oh, how crazy! And they do. They finish the regular season with each other.
The Iron Bowl.
How about Alabama? I'm not making excuses again. I didn't go to Alabama. All right. But how about Alabama's end of the year schedule? They're at Tennessee tomorrow afternoon, but Alabama played Kentucky last Saturday at home. Alabama played Mississippi State from the top 25 this week in their second game in the midweek. They're playing at Tennessee tomorrow. Then they host Florida, Jay Recher. Then at Auburn. That's the last 5 games of the regular season. Then go play the SEC tournament in Nashville. And how long do they stay alive for?
It's going to be harder to win that SEC tournament probably than that.
What a brutal schedule for that as well, my friend.
And it was last month when my parents were in town. Tennessee, I think, were the 6th ranked team in the country. They had 4 SEC losses. Like, that should just tell you everything you need to know.
How tough they are.
Before I get you out of here, tell me Tank Davis, he's the main event this weekend. Gervonta, I mean, look at the lightweight. A lot of people look at him as the number 2 lightweight in the world. I mean, I still, kind of looking, all right, who's his next challenge after this one? I think he's probably going to come out on top. Obviously, they have to go out there and box. But, I mean, Tank Davis is one of those names. He's one of the more popular names in the game, and he wants to keep that O.
If you are a fight fan, this guy doesn't fight that often right now, but he's explosive.
Yeah, he is.
At the smaller weights, big-time power in either hand. Gervonta Tank Davis. He is fighting a guy that he has history with for a couple of reasons. They fought in the amateurs a couple of times. The guy's name is Lavonte Roach. Roach is a world title holder in the division below, junior lightweight. Roach also from Washington, D.C., Davis from Baltimore. Those two areas do not like each other. Why this fight is not in D.C. or Baltimore, I don't understand. It would be bedlam if they had it there regionally. But Tank Davis has drawn wherever he's been, whether he's been in Atlanta or Las Vegas or Texas. Now he's fighting at the Barclays Center for like the 3rd time in his career. They're expecting, this is already out there, Jay Recher. We're talking about it on your show and podcast. The largest live gate ever for any sporting event, not concerts, for any sporting event, any Brooklyn Nets game, college basketball, the WWE, whatever, inside the Barclays Center. This is going to be the largest live gate they've ever had for what they're charging for the tickets, the amount of revenue for Gervonta Davis, Lavonte Roach tomorrow night on pay-per-view. I know it's a pricey pay-per-view. It's like $79.95. But this guy is a big-time puncher at the lightweight division. I want to see him step up to bigger and better fights here in 2025. Let's see if he gets this one in March. And maybe do we get the name that you like, the name Shakur Stevenson down the road? That's the name you want.
The prodigy, right? You look at so I think you go either one way or the other, right? Because when you look at the rankings, you look at the lightweight, and there's a lot of times you look like, oh, you cleaned out the division. This is an opportunity to like win this fight, and you can either go legacy fight and fight Lomachenko, who's right behind him in the rankings, who, in my mind, one of the best fighters of this generation. Or do you go with the future, right? Because Tank is 30, right? Tank's not 25.
Correct.
Tank's 30. So, do you fight a Shakur Stevenson? I mean, Shakur is probably the closest thing we've seen to a Floyd Mayweather, of a guy that's just precision punching, doesn't take a lot of damage. I mean, I think boxing is almost holding it back a little bit. Like, I want to see more Shakur, but he's probably in line for a big time fight. Well, I mean, probably.
Yeah.
So he fights here in February. He's probably going to fight twice a year. So end of the summer, maybe end of the year.
I would love to see. I don't know if it'll be next, but I would love to see by the end of this year a build up to Shakur Stevenson and Gervonta Davis, even if they both fight one more time each. Shakur just fought on the Saudi Arabian card last week, a last minute replacement. He beat the guy, he knocked him out. But this could build up. If they both get wins like later this summer, give me that fight. Sign me up. Because Shakur's the former silver medalist. He's been on ESPN a bunch. People know who he is. Give me that. Can we have good things? Can we have that? Stay tuned.
He got robbed, too. He should have won the gold as well.
Yeah.
He is TJ Rives at Bucs Sideline Guy. Bet US TV does a little bit of everything. 3 Dog Thursday. Compass Media Net. Big fight weekend. Dad of
too many hats like in my background. Probably too many hats.
More hats or more shoes? We never know.
I don't know. I don't have any. You know what? I only have like 2 pairs of shoes. You got all the shoes. You got all the colorful shoes. I literally have like 2 or 3 pairs of shoes. I got a lot of hats, though, back there in the background. I love talking Bucs with you in this offseason. College basketball have me back. The fights as well. That Gervonta Davis fight is pay-per-view Saturday night in and around all the college hoops. You have me back anytime, brother. Keep up the great work.
Appreciate it, TJ. Have a great weekend, pal.
You too.